Hello, I'm John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from downtown Prince George, British Columbia, Canada. Now, Prince George, British Columbia is a big province. It's and Prince George is about 500 miles north of Vancouver. Today we got a special guest. Her name is Dana Diaz. Dana, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So you are located in Illinois, 90
I
miles.
am southwest of Chicago. Everybody knows where, at least has heard of Chicago,
Yeah.
hopefully.
Oh, yeah. No.
We have the tallest building in the world.
And that is called.
It's the Willis Tower now, but it used to be the Sears Tower, and that's what I'll always remember it by.
And that has been there for a long time. It was built a long time ago already, right?
Yeah, early 1900s, late 1800s possibly. I'm not sure exactly, but yeah, it's been there for quite some time. It's amazing that it's still standing.
Yeah, it's amazing. Also, for I've been there several times, and it's always one of the things that catches your eye, no matter how you come into Chicago. Even if you fly into the area, you really see the tower.
Yes, and my uncle used to work there, and he, unbeknownst to me, when my son was 6 years old, I found out that my uncle took my son. I'm having a heart attack thinking about it, to the very top of the building, to the rooftop where the antennas are. I guess I'm glad my son had that amazing and very unique experience, but as a mother, he's my only one. I'd rather he wasn't standing on the very top of the tallest building in the world in a windy city.
How do they get there, Dana? I just wonder because
I am terrified of heights, so I don't know, but I heard there were a lot of elevators and a lot of doors and a
right,
couple little ladders. So not many people are allowed up that way, but
right.
I guess my son got the special treatment. I'm not sure if that's good or bad, but he's
He,
still here with us.
he will always remember it, right?
I would imagine that's something that's hard to forget.
Now, tell us a little bit about your background, Dana. You have a very interesting past and currently very actively involved in a number of things. So tell us about yourself.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in Chicago. I was born to a teenage mother that unfortunately didn't want me, and that was during a time when teenage pregnancies were not as widely accepted as they are now. So, um, there was always strange as a little emotional detachment. But otherwise, I was just trying to be a kid. Kids are just trying to have fun and enjoy life and do cartwheels on the lawn and
Sure.
be kids. Um, but when she got married, she married, I didn't know what a narcissist was, but I saw somebody who was very controlling, demeaning, insulted people. He thought he still thinks he's much more superior than anybody he's ever come across. He has a tendency to purchase things and have possessions that demonstrate some sort of status. Very showy, brags about them. So, typically what you'd think of when you think of a narcissist. But again, I was a kid. I didn't know. I didn't like the treatment that I would get, especially when my mother wasn't around. He unfortunately was verbally abusive, and then it developed into physical abuse. But honestly, the physical abuse, as awful as it could be, was nothing. It didn't affect me like the verbal abuse. The verbal abuse, I'm going to be 48 in a couple months, and the verbal abuse still sometimes I hear him talking to me in my head, telling me that nobody ever wanted me, nobody's ever going to love me. I'm a burden. I'm a bother. He shouldn't have to pay for another man's child. I've been called stupid, incompetent, I mean, just I
Horrible.
remember being a little girl going to dance class, and he called me a whore because I was wearing a leotard and tights. And that's just what you wore to dance class when you were a little girl in the 80s. So it, that stuff is really hard. And unfortunately, it sort of set me up to have an unhealthy and abusive marriage, because I went out into the world and I thought that you had to earn love.
Yeah.
And, I met somebody who I actually thought was a jerk, and he reminded me very much of my stepfather, in the way that he felt very entitled to servitude, so to speak. And he had certain parameters that, well, if you do these things, I felt like a dog with a treat. Like I'll give you affection if you do this stuff, but if you don't do those things or you displease me in some way, then I'm going to withhold and I'm going to give you the silent treatment. And it was very, very similar to how my stepfather operated. So it was familiar to me. And in that sense, I think we do tend towards familiar situations in life. Because I'm not sure I would have known what to do with somebody who treated me nicely. But at the same time, it was really hard knowing that it didn't feel right. And I had seen loving relationships, among people, and I just knew I wasn't in one of those. But I stayed because, all my childhood, I saw my mother excusing and enabling. And, even when I would go to her about my relationship, she would tell me, oh, well, just like your stepdad, they only mistreat you to the extent that they love you, which she was basically saying, well, if somebody loves you, they're going to hurt you.
Yeah.
And, it still didn't feel right. It didn't make sense to me, but I didn't know any other way. So that led into a 25-year long relationship that didn't end well. It ended very badly. I mean, I don't think things end good necessarily, but it turned into domestic violence and him wanting me dead. Yeah.
Oof. Did you have siblings with your mom?
Well, my mother
Or the
and her
second?
husband
Yeah.
did. Yeah, they had a child together.
Okay.
Um, but I was about 14 when he was born.
Right.
And they treated him perfectly. They wanted him. He was very much, he was very loved and encouraged and supported. So it was just me that, I was the exception. I was not deserving of it. And it's a very, very unfortunate how common that is in families, that they could have multiple children and only treat one a certain way and treat the rest very well. And I was just unfortunately that one that didn't get treated well. So we had two very different childhoods from the same house and the same parents.
So how old were you when you kind of left that relationship with your mom and your stepfather?
I as soon as I was 18 years old, as a matter of fact, I
Yeah.
remember on my 18th birthday, I walked out the door. I was legally able to be an adult and not have to report back home. And I just did whatever I had to do. I had a boyfriend that was a little old, an apartment. I had friends I could stay at their houses here and there for a night or two or a few days. A couple times I slept in my car at the train station, but it was better than, sleeping with one eye open in that house and worrying
Exactly.
about what would happen.
Even at that age still, even at 18, he was still abusive?
Yeah, it got worse as I grew older. I mean, I think because, I always joked when I had my son that, you're only in control of your child as long as you could physically overtake them. But I
Right.
think that that's, especially in an abusive situation, it's easier to abuse somebody who's smaller than you. And the abuse started when I was, I want to say 5 or 6, somewhere around there. Um, and I couldn't defend myself. I mean, I'm still smaller, I'm only 5'3" and barely over 100 pounds, but I was, a very tiny, tiny little girl, very
Right.
scrawny. So I was easily mishandled. But as I got older, as strong-willed as I was even a stronger-willed teenager. So I would speak up and I would talk back and I would tell them, that I shouldn't be treated that way. And I used certain language because I didn't know what else to do to express my anger and my frustration at it. I remember once even being slapped, and I slapped right back across the cheek. And I'm not saying that's right, but, I tried to stand up for myself. But, you know, at, once I tried calling for help. I picked up the phone and the phone was taken out of my hand and I was beaten over the head with it. My hair, I've always had this long hair, and I was taken by the hair and they'd grasp it. It was my stepfather, and he'd bang my head against the wall. I'd go to school with bruises on my forehead. And it's a very humiliating thing to go to school at any age and have to go to the nurse. What they do if they think somebody is being abused is they have to document the injuries on your body. So they have a regular sheet of paper that has just a general outline, no gender or anatomy, but just a general outline of a person, a human figure, and they mark on there, so you have to remove, your shirt and, well, not your whole shirt, but open your sleeves, show your marks on you, and they mark it on this piece of paper. And it's a very shameful thing. And then you go to class and everyone wants to know, why they called you down and what's going to happen. And when the police come and question you, then, you have to answer to that. There's all this attention that you don't want. And, at one point, Child Services got involved as well, but they didn't do anything either. They questioned some of our neighbors and some of the employees that worked for my mother and stepfather. And of course, everybody said these are upstanding citizens. They're nice people. They'd never do that. But they did do that. And it's just that they weren't walking around, with butcher knives in the streets looking like crazy people. They were these nice, very generous and charitable, members of the community.
But you felt you were the problem, probably.
Yes, well, it's a typical narcissistic thing. And I
Yeah,
think not just narcissists, but abusers in general tend to create a narrative, outside of the home, that this person is mentally unstable or this person has issues, because I think they know at some point you're going to confide in somebody or expose them in some way, and they have to make sure that people think you're a liar. And
exactly.
it's very easy when you're a child for, them to say, it was chalked up to I was lying to get attention.
That was the
And I had
easier.
self-inflicted the wounds, right? And my mother and stepfather, I'll never forget them sitting in the police station, looking, with tear-filled eyes and looking all sad, that they had this difficult daughter they didn't know what to do with. And yes, I admit I used language with them because I was angry, and yes, I slapped my mother back across the face that one day that she slapped me. But other than that, I have to say, I mean, I'm not. There might be people out there thinking, oh, well, maybe you were a teenager, you were doing things. No, I was, from grade school on. They wanted to move me up 2 grades in school because I was supposedly gifted. I scored high on tests. I was honor roll. I played viola in 2 symphonic orchestras. I ran in track. I was in dance. I did everything. I was a good kid. I'm going to be 48. I've never, ever, ever smoked one cigarette in my life. I've never smoked weed. I've never done a recreational drug. Even in high school, I tried to go to a party and I called a cab to go home because I wasn't interested in getting drunk and doing all these things. So it's not like I was a bad kid. I was in
No.
bed by 8 o'clock most nights on my own volition. I liked getting my sleep and waking up early and going for a run or working out. I was not, I just wanted love, and they chose not to give it to me. And it's a very hurtful thing. And when you're a child, you don't have a way to express that.
So then you left the
Yeah.
environment when you were 18. You were still in high school. Did you then go further?
Well, that was right when I graduated high school. So then I was going to college.
Okay.
Um, I was a freshman in college, and yeah, I went to school full time. I was working full time. I was definitely busy, but I just found other places to stay if I could. I just didn't feel comfortable staying in that house. It didn't feel safe to me. I honestly felt safer those nights that I slept in my car or even sleeping on the floor of a friend's bedroom. It was just safer for me.
So then you kind of fell in love. Got
Yeah, I wouldn't say I fell in love, but so, yes, this young man came across my path, and let's just say one thing led to another that I didn't exactly want to happen, but I let it happen, and it all just happened so fast. And looking back, I realized that's also a narcissistic quality, as they move
right.
very quickly to sort of entrap you. I mean, within one night, he loved me. I was the one. It was him and I against the world, he said. And, it was amazing how much he claimed to have in common with me when I was telling him about, things that had happened in my childhood at home and my life. And, I thought, well, maybe there's something here. Maybe I'm being judgmental. Maybe I'm being picky. Maybe my gut is wrong. But it was within 6 weeks he had me moved in. But I had already seen a lot of the angry outbursts and these qualities that I didn't feel comfortable with. But I don't even know why or how, but I turned into my mother. It's all I knew. I said he must have had a bad day. I must have provoked the anger. I should watch that.
Did
And
you
I kind of internalized what he was doing.
did you find out anything about his background? Because
Well, a week.
he must have had. But I always say, that from we have encountered situations, the past is the best teacher. Get to
Oh,
know
yeah.
somebody because their conduct of the past will carry into their adulthood.
Exactly. And, the first night that I hung out with him, one of the things that stood out um, was when he was talking about a girl that he had just stopped dating. And I remember thinking that I don't like this at all, if that's how he treats girls, because he was talking about how he wasn't even interested in her because he felt slighted by her in some way. He was just offended at something that she had said or done. And so he purposely led her on and built her up and made her think they were something more than what he intended. And then he just cut her off. I guess they call that ghosting now, but back then we didn't have a name for it. And I just thought that's to intentionally hurt somebody like that, that's just, to me, that's cruel. And especially coming from the background that I came from. But a week after that, he had me, I mean, again, it happened all so fast. He already had me meet his parents, and these were the two loveliest people I'd ever met. I always say it was like being on the Beaver Cleaver show. They were the parents I wish I had. And I thought, there's no way. I thought, I have to be wrong about him, because there's no way that somebody, with bad intentions and with an impure heart like that could come from these two people. She was very conservative and very proper. And his dad was just jolly, is all I remember. Just a really happy, supportive, non-judgmental, just a nice man. They were just nice people.
Did you have
They came from a
siblings?
little small. Yeah, he had a sister. that was from his mother's first marriage. Her first husband had passed away. And so then she remarried his father. So the sister was from the previous marriage. She was only 4 years older. Um, and that's where I was trying to make sense, and I'm still trying to make sense of things, because he always made it to seem that his sister was the golden child and he was the scapegoat. And that's why he said we were alike. We were both the scapegoat children. But he felt that she always was, favored. She was given more. She was, whatever she wanted, she got. And he was always sort of dismissed and neglected in some way. So there was always a general feeling with him. I always felt like he had issues with women in general, but he certainly felt slighted by particularly his mother and his sister. So it was interesting to me to find all this information out. And I naturally, it's just a tendency, I psychoanalyze people. So I was kind of putting this together as time was going on. And I'm still, even though it's all done and over, I'm still remembering things and making sense of them.
Didn't sound right, right? Didn't feel right.
No, not at all. And even when his sister and I had gotten friendly at one point a few years in, I had kind of brought some things up. Like, I'm really surprised. I can't imagine anything like, with your parents are just lovely. And she just was very confused. That didn't happen. Why would you say that? And so then it made me think, but why would he say it if it wasn't true? I guess I was naive to think, oh, a boy wouldn't lie to me. But she had no reason to lie to me either. So I was getting two different stories. It's a very difficult situation to be in, and to be in the middle of it and not sure who's really telling the truth or who has a different perception, because I know that we can have a philosophical conversation about the truth in itself. There's always different perspectives on the same situation. But if she's the golden child, of course, she's not going to perceive things the way that the scapegoat child does. So I wasn't sure. I still sometimes am not sure what to make of it. But there was definitely resentment on his end towards his sister and to his mother in particular.
So then you became pregnant during the relationship, but you were
Yeah,
with,
we got married and got pregnant.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and that just escalated the situation, because he needed to be number one, and now that we had this newborn, he was not number one, he was number two. And that, I mean, I think he was happy for about a week after the baby came. I think that it made him feel, um, I felt like a possession. I felt like the baby and I were possessions to him, like we were his, and like he had a bigger claim on me now that I was the mother of his child. But after he saw this newborn baby is going to cry at night and I'm going to go tend to the baby, he didn't like that. He would tell me a wife is supposed to be in bed with her husband at night. Okay, but the baby's crying. Well, the baby needs to cry it out. Okay, well, we can have a debate about that, but right now this is a newborn baby that needs its diapers changed and I need to go feed him. So, I'm going to go do that. And it just escalated to the point where within a couple months of our son being born, he had ousted me from our bedroom. So I stayed in the guest room with my baby. And for many, many, many years, longer than probably what my son would like to admit, my son and I stayed in a bedroom and I was not in the bedroom with my husband.
So you were with him for 25 years?
Total, yes.
So by then, so that is up to about 3 or 4 years ago?
Yes, 3 years ago.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and now during that period, that must have been so difficult, when you had your son and all of a sudden a bad situation got worse.
Mm-hmm.
Did you still have, now you had a situation where your mother and your ex-father-in-law likely were still together, but that was no more support to you,
Correct.
and neither was how. What did his parents do in the meantime? And because now they had a grandson, probably the first one.
My son, actually, my sister-in-law had her first two. She had two babies first. So my
Okay.
son was the third grandchild, but my father-in-law unfortunately passed in 2005, which was a devastating loss because I was very close to him. And he was, there's always that one person in a family that keeps the family together, and that was him. So my son was only 2 years old when my father-in-law passed. My mother-in-law always acknowledged that my husband had anger issues, but that's what she called it, was anger issues, and said he'd always been that way. But there was no sympathy or anything for me. I think my father-in-law, I could go to him and tell him things, and he was very understanding and supportive of me. He was very much a father to me. Um, so it was really hard when he passed away suddenly, and yeah, I didn't have anyone to turn to. My
That
mother-in-law
was
kind of distanced herself as well after her husband passed away. So it just, I feel like we were just kind of out there by ourselves because my husband had moved us at that point out to a rural area. Again, a typical narcissistic move is to uh, isolate you from your family and friends and everything you know. So we were out in a rural area where I knew nothing and nobody, nowhere near family, not even his. And it was very lonely. I had my son, and I just revolved my life around him. But it did get tricky because here we are in this volatile atmosphere. There was financial abuse happening, um, sexual things that we would call that sexual abuse. I guess that would fall under. I mean, unfortunately, when you're married, you can still have to engage in things that you're not wanting or willing to. And then my son was in the middle of this. And I know that children see and hear more than you think they see and hear,
they
even if
do.
you try. I always overcompensated and, put on the smile and tried to over exaggerate, my happiness to make it like everything was okay. But he saw through everything. And as he got older, he would tell me things. So I knew he knew what was going on.
So he was about 20, your son, when you split with your husband?
My son is 20 now, so he was
Yeah.
17
Yeah.
when everything happened. Yeah, going 17, going on 18. So
And so your husband, ex-husband, gone
mhm.
out of the picture now altogether? Kind of.
um, kind of. He purposely moved 7 miles from where I moved to, so he's nearby. We are cautious because at the very end, actually, even after the divorce, is when he was the most violent. And he told some mutual friends that he was planning to kill me, and he did make 2 attempts.
Oh,
So we are very, very cautious. Yes. And unfortunately, the authorities were of no assistance. And, the most that I was able to fight for after 3 court dates, I was able to get an emergency order of protection that said he couldn't come within 10 feet of me.
yeah.
And I argued with the judge that I was 93 pounds at the time and 5'3", and that from 10 feet away, he could probably throw a 2x4 at me and hurt me.
Yeah.
He could do all kinds of things from 10 feet away, but that's all that I could get. So
So
he has moved on, though. He has found another gal that he has
another
moved in also very quickly. And since he is with her, he
another
has
victim.
not bothered me. Well, you know what? I hope not. I
No.
honestly hope not. That's something I tell people all the time. I don't wish him any, unfortunately, despite everything, I don't wish him any bad things. I hope that this girl is it for him. I hope that she is safe. I hope that her daughters that live with them are safe. Do I know? No, it's not my business. It's not my place. I'm not going to warn her. They are two adults. They are consenting. Their relationship is between them. It's not my burden anymore to worry about him. But I do hope, because I unfortunately have to pass they live on a main road. So I do have to pass them sometimes because it is the main road that goes through our area. So it's impossible to avoid sometimes. And I might see somebody standing outside, and I just hope, I hope everything's okay over there. And just because somebody is bad to one person, I mean, look at me and my brother. My brother thinks our mother and my stepfather are the two most amazing parents a boy could have. They were the worst parents. They were a nightmare to me. So I always tell people, just because he and I had this oil and water relationship does not mean that he is not capable of finding somebody that, he has a good relationship with. But again, that's not my problem. It's going to be up to them to figure that
Let
out.
let's hope so. So,
Yeah, I do hope so.
you know, so how's your son doing? He's now
Very
25?
well. He
Is
is
he
20 now. He is
he's 20
20.
now. So what
Just 20.
with
He's very good.
all of
He's
this,
very well.
yeah, you are amazing, Dana, because
Oh,
you
thank
you
you.
you sound very knowledgeable. You're an excellent communicator, and
Oh, thank you.
how. But I wonder about how did you, at some point. What I always say that people go through difficult periods, not necessarily to the extent that you did, but at some point they have to come to peace with themselves in terms
Yes.
of where do we go from here forward. And you have found
Yeah.
that, obviously, to a certain extent. Uh,
Yes.
how did you do that?
I wish that I could say that there was some magic wand that I waved and I just woke up one day and everything was better. But honestly, it was a long, awful process, and I don't think it ever really ends. I think you just get better as time goes on. But what I came to understand for myself was that I did, as you said, have to accept the past, um, and accept it in a way that I wasn't angry anymore. I think we all start with the pain of it and we're
Yeah,
sad, and then it turns into anger.
yeah,
And once I was done with that anger, I could just look at it and say it was what it was. It wasn't ideal, but it was still a part of me, and it's part of who made me. It's going to always be
always
some
be
part
there.
of me. So, yeah. So, do I have CPTSD from childhood and from my marriage? Yes. Is it getting better? Absolutely. I went through some writing therapy last year because talk therapy wasn't, the best option for me. But I came to learn that how I react to people and situations was how I was going to heal. And I thought I was afraid to go out and be around people. People hurt. And so I thought isolating myself and just not going anywhere and not making new friends and, just avoiding interaction altogether was going to solve everything. But actually it just made it worse, because then I was getting depressed, and the depression would turn into anxiety, and then my body would react to all that. So that wasn't working either. And what I found, and some might argue with this. A longtime friend actually entered the picture. He actually proposed to me not long after my divorce, although I always say divorce doesn't end on the day of the divorce. It ended many years before.
Right.
But I found that being in a relationship with somebody who my husband, I'm married to him now. He's very calm and very gentle. So when I would become emotionally dysregulated and maybe be on the verge of a panic attack because something triggered me or I was upset, his calmness, his very quiet and gentle demeanor was sort of contagious. And sometimes just, him hugging me and me laying my, head on his chest and hearing his calm heartbeat would help mine to slow so my nervous system could kind of reset, because you're not going to be productive in a place where your emotions are running in every direction. You can't calm during chaos. So I feel like being with somebody like him, sort of holding my hand through this healing journey, actually accelerated the process for me, because I had I had a calming effect on me, but also somebody that was speaking positivity to me, because it's very, very hard to still let go of all those things that my stepfather told me, even when I was 5 and 6 years old, even though it was, over 40 years ago. Um, there are still days where I think, maybe I am worthless. Why am I here? But I don't think it as much anymore because I
No.
have somebody speaking positive words to me. And I think there's something to be said for having your environment kind of helps you form your self-image. And I'm just kind of learning that positivity for myself. But I think that you can go to therapy and you can learn things and read things and watch the videos and have all these tools. But if you are not practicing your reaction, if you're not being triggered by people and things and interacting with people to be able to practice how to control yourself and self-regulate, you're not going to heal. So that's where I feel like, having, thank God I had this friendship with him that, it turned romantic, but to have him kind of hold my hand and be there, sort of, I hate to say as a guinea pig, but to practice these tools with, thank God for his patience, because I've come in such a long way. I mean, I'm so far better than what I was a year ago. And I know a year from now, there's going to be things that that won't even bother me that 2 years ago I might have been in the fetal position in a corner crying about for days, So it's a long process, but it does get better. I just urge people to really think before I understand isolating, but you need to actually be around people and be around good, supportive people during your healing journey.
Yeah, your experience in particular that lasted for so many years and through different relationships that were so
Yeah.
difficult, has given you a lot of experience, and obviously you reflected on it a lot and then found a normal situation. That's how I look at what you have now.
Yeah, it is.
And then it becomes a question of how can you share with others, because this is not uncommon. You know that, I know that, we have
Right.
all seen it. And for you to be able to share your experience with others, either in speaking about it as you do in your podcasting, as well as writing about it, I believe is very important.
Yeah, I agree. And that's why I've been doing this is, there are so many victims that think they're alone and they think their situation is unique. And I was one of those people. I had no idea that other people felt the way I did. And so I think that that's something that I bring to the table that, even if it's not polite or it's not nice, if it's what I felt in that situation, I say it and I write it because I want people to know that it's okay. It's okay to feel those things. It's okay. You have to be completely honest with yourself if there's any hope of, getting past those things. But, I also want to be an example to people that yes, and I know we tend to compare our situations. There are people even that I have met who have been through just things that are so much more horrific than anything I could have imagined enduring. However, all of our pain is the same. And I think it's important for somebody to speak up about it, and for all those who are afraid to, and all those who even don't have the words or the ability to even understand how they feel, or why they feel that way. If I can bring some light to that so that they can have some perspective, that, I've had people reach out to me and say, because I read your book, or because I heard you on this podcast, I had the strength to leave this toxic relationship or leave my abusive husband. And I'm not trying to get everybody to leave their situation. I
No.
just want people to understand and make a better choice for themselves, whatever that choice may be. Because for some people, we have to acknowledge this, even people in horrible abusive situations, some might actually be better staying, because we want them alive and we want them with us for their children and what have you. And it would be very risky for some people to try to leave.
But to know they are not alone, and that
Exactly.
a lot of times people, as you did in your situation, do not usually get exposure to others, and
Right.
and for you to be able to share what you went through, I think is very important for you, as well as for others that listen to you. And just tell you a little bit about myself. In a different way is that I'm going to be 83 in November the 1st. So
Oh, congratulations.
thank you.
You look great for 83, by the
Well,
way.
thank you. I'm going to live very healthy and eat well. I want to be 120. So I'm
Oh
going
my
to.
goodness.
Yeah. So I grew up in Holland during I was
Okay.
born in 1940 during the war years, and I still remember the war was difficult. I remember from the time I was between 4 and 5 years old that there was nothing to eat, and anxiety because my dad was drafted into the Dutch army, and they didn't know if he was dead or alive for 5 years. The last time they heard of him was when they saw him just before the bombing of Rotterdam, where they bombed the whole downtown area. So
Oh my
my mother
gosh.
had 3 kids, and it was difficult. And during the winter of 1945, they called it the Hunger Winter. And so that was difficult, and I believe we were liberated by the Canadian Army April the 12th, 1945. Saw far too much that we should not have seen. Things were difficult. There was a lot of bad things that happened in terms of wars. But in any event, still it affected me from the perspective of PTSD, as well as the
Yeah.
inner child. And then I was not very successful academically. I failed grade 3, I failed grade 7 3 times, and for a long time I felt like I had been a failure. And, because how can I possibly have a family and buy a house and have a job? I got no education. So it took me till I was, you may find this interesting, until I came to Canada, which I always believed I should do. When we were liberated by the Canadians, it made such an impression on me that I always knew I would go. One of my dreams was to go to Canada, the land of my heroes. And so I tried to go when I was 17, but my parents wouldn't let me. And then I won when I was 24. But I was not very successful academically, as I said, and I felt that I had failed. And the other dream that I had, I go to Canada, start from the ground up with nothing, and then build a lumber mill, because my grandfather was a master carpenter. My dad managed a small lumber mill. And so I came to Canada in July of 1965. I came by train, came to Vancouver, couldn't speak the English. I didn't know English. I didn't know anybody. I didn't have a job, and I wanted to build a lumber mill. So they said, go to Prince George, 500 miles north. That's where all the opportunities are. So when I came off the bus in Prince George, I had $25.47, and then underneath that I always write, the foundation of my life is attitude, avoid the negative, stay positive, the glass is half full, find a passion, something that you would like, and then work ethic, give it everything that you got, and then success will follow. My employees gave that to me. And so I started with no money, $25.40. Within 2 years, I was the superintendent of a large sawmill actually here. And within 10 years, I built my own lumber mill. And then from there on in, I started building more. And the point that I'm trying to make is that even then, everybody said, oh, you're so successful. I didn't feel that way. I thought still that I had failed. And then one day I walked into a store here, and for some reason or another, I picked up a book, and I opened the book, not this one, and I looked at the book, and the title of the book was Driven to Distraction, and it was about ADHD. And I said, oh my God, that's me. And I was already, that was 1997, I was already 57 years old. And now I finally knew that I had no idea about ADHD. So I had still issues with PTSD. I still had issues with the inner child, although I got counseling for that when I was more than 50 years old. Very emotional, actually, but very helpful.
It is.
But then with ADHD, now I had an idea, and I got the book, and I wrote, when I was standing there in the bookstore, and I looked at the book, I went through the book, and finally somebody came up and said, you're going to buy it or what? You know, so anyway, obviously I bought it. And then I wrote in Dutch, because I was ashamed of ADHD. It's a mental deficiency of some sort. So I wrote in it, now finally I know who I am, in Dutch.
Oh.
It took me 5 years before I would go to my doc, who had delivered our two daughters, as well as a personal friend. And so I already knew for 5 years that now I had looked at Google and I did research on it, and there was a lot of stigma around it. And then, so he said, hey, John, why are you here? I said, I think I got ADHD. So we looked at it together, and yeah, I do, you know. So the point that I'm making is that the more I knew about it, the more I became aware of it, the more I felt that not only that when I left Holland and felt that I had failed and started here and was successful by the feel of a lot of people, I didn't feel that way. And then when I read about the ADHD, it told me my past in combination with PTSD and the inner child. A lot of people said to me, you have to write about it. You have to tell, because I went through a difficult period, started from the ground up, not having confidence, feeling good about myself. And so I started to think about writing a book about it. So I thought about it for 20 years, started several times to write, and then stopped again, started again, stopped again. And then I knew about 5 years ago that if I don't do it now, it will never happen.
Right.
So I wrote this book against all odds. And it's not about, it's an autobiography, but it's not about hoorah, hoorah, John, how successful he is, but in spite of it all, going through all the ups and downs, and then staying the course, believing, never give up, and attitude,
Exactly.
passion, work ethic. And so it took me 80 years to live it, 20 years to think about it, 2 years to write it. I never wrote a book in my life, but I knew if I'm going to write it, it has to be done well. So,
Yes.
and I spent a lot of time on it, and it's very successful actually, and put a team together because there is a lot of complications around writing books, So,
Oh, yes.
so
I know.
I'm going to send you this one, and then
Oh, thank you.
then the other thing that I felt that, and this comes to some of the things that we are talking about, and your experience, and you're an amazing, and I'm not saying that because to make you feel good, but I'm impressed by your background in terms of what you went through and the things that you are sharing with others, and I believe that is so important. And obviously,
Thank you.
And so I felt I had to do the same with ADHD, because a lot of people feel that it is a shortcoming or something mentally wrong, or there's stigma around it. I believe it
Yes,
is.
there is.
I believe it is a superpower, and so I wrote a book about it, ADHD Unlocked,
Oh, I love it.
and it's written by me as somebody in ADHD. You can open it up anywhere, start writing, reading, and wherever you look at. This one, quite successful. We will send you a copy of it. And then,
Oh my goodness, thank you.
and I did another one that, so I'm trying to write a book every year. So this one is, so many people do not like what they are doing, and actually a couple of weeks ago, from the United States, actually, I was watching a program and about people that have building careers or have jobs, that they said 70% of the people that are working do not like their jobs, and 75% of them are looking for other jobs. And I said, that I always felt that. I didn't know it was that high a number, but I can see it is. So I wrote another book, is Finding Your Passion, Living the Dream. And if I look at myself from all the things that I've done, if you ask me, you say, are you living the dream, John? I am. That I usually get up early in the morning at 5:30, and I go to work, and I always feel that I'm late. I always make my bed before I leave, and I'm usually the first one at work and the last one to leave, and I very much enjoy it, to do that, and all those things are important.
That's amazing.
And what I do now, as you do in a way, I speak about the things and the experiences that I've had, mainly saying not so much how successful I am in business,
Right.
but more about people that go through difficult experiences, not only ADHD, it may be trauma. People are affected by trauma, and affects their ability to study in a normal fashion that other people would.
Yes.
And to speak about it, and to see the opportunities, and to find peace with who you are, with all the not you, but you in a general sense, all the things that
Right.
have happened through a life, and how to share that with others in a positive way, and then feel positive about it.
Exactly. And I think that that's an amazing thing that you can do that. And I'm so thankful that I've been able to do the little that I've been able to do so far. But I always look at it as, I'm climbing a mountain, and I'm going to get to the top, but I'm reaching down to try to help everyone else get there with me. I think that we can be so much better if we all help each other, and if we're learning things as we go, and it's never too late. As we have both proven, it's never too late. So I think people just need to see us as an example, and know that there's hope, and know that they can get there too, and that people like us are willing to help them, and we're trying to give them the resources and the information so that they can make the changes that they want to make to have a better life, because it is possible.
In cases like yourself, and I hope me as well, is sharing your honesty with it, and being open about it, and sharing that with people, I think is unique and very, very special.
Yeah, I agree. I think it helps people relate to it more, instead of being told that they should do this or that. I think just to know that we're just, people. I was out on Saturday and there were people that were coming up to me saying, "Oh, I've seen you on YouTube," or I remember seeing your book. And I just said to them, "I'm just me. I'm just a regular person like you. I'm just happy. I just happen to share these things and publicly, to help everyone else. But, at the end of the day, we're all just human. We're all the same. So, we just have to try to make the world a better place, whatever way we can, in little ways and in big ways, but we can all do it."
And that's what I like about podcasting. Can you imagine that I'm sitting here in Prince George, British Columbia, podcasting with Dana Diaz in yeah, in
In
Illinois.
Illinois.
Yeah, and talking like friends about our lives and our background, and then at the same time making a commitment to, in terms of what we do is helping at least
Yes.
some people, to give them hope in situation where
Yes.
they wonder if there is hope, or in sharing with them other people's stories that have encountered challenges and difficulty, but to at least say that develop peace within you.
Yes.
I believe, and that's how I feel about it, is that and share with others, and I enjoy very much. I'm a professional speaker. I do speaking to young people in particular, but on keynotes throughout British Columbia and other places, and in writing books, and obviously being very active as a podcaster, and meeting amazing people.
Yes, it is fun to do that. I feel like I have friends everywhere in the world now. I just have to start traveling so I can come visit everybody.
I like it. So as you now go forward, what do you see going forward in the next 5 to 10 years? You love going home. Obviously, you have found a friend and a husband,
Yes.
and your son is doing well, so
He is. It's hard to think about 5 years because honestly, I mean, just 3 years ago, like you said, 3 years ago, I was in the most awful, most violent domestic violence situation that I'd ever been in with my ex 3 short years ago. He had me isolated in a small town. I had a college degree, but I was, scrubbing toilets and hand washing floors, cleaning houses for money. And, here I am 3 years later, and I'm healthier, and I'm mentally, I'm so in such a better place, and I'm happy. And I mean, I never imagined I'd publish a book, and I have two more that will be published next year. So to imagine 5 years from now, I have no idea, but I think it's like you said, just envisioning. I always tell people, my advice is to say, no matter where you are in life, no matter who you are, ask yourself, what do I want? What do I see? What would I want my life to look like, if nothing was off limits? And for me, it had been, I would love to be a published author, and now I'm a published author, and I wanted to travel. And I mean, my husband and I took 9 trips last year all around the world. We've been on, I want to say, 5 this year. We're leaving Thursday on another trip. So what more could I ask for? I'm so I'm so fulfilled right now, and I'm so happy. And so even if I was exactly where I am in 5 years, I'd be thrilled.
Tell us about the book you wrote, Dana.
Sure. It's called Gasping for Air, The Stranglehold of Narcissistic Abuse. And it focuses on the 25-year-long relationship with my ex from when I met him, and goes all the way through till after the end. And the title is actually referring to, we didn't get to talk about this, but the stress of being in that situation with him for so long, and plus the additional stress of the childhood abuse that I endured, actually caused so much of the stress hormone cortisol to run through my body that I developed a lung syndrome by the end of 2019. I was so sick. I needed an oxygen machine and a backpack to breathe. I had dwindled down to 93 pounds. I could barely function. And at one point, my doctor told me that my body was shutting down. Every major organ in my body was shutting down. And they kept urging me in the nicest way possible to change my lifestyle and change my circumstances. And by that, they meant I needed to get out of that marriage and cut my ties with my ex. And I finally was able to do that in 2020, despite COVID and the pandemic and all the shutdowns. But that's why we called the book Gasping for Air, because it did feel like I was being strangled and held, and I just couldn't breathe. I couldn't do anything without his permission, and he certainly didn't want me to be alive. So it was a part of my life that was not good, but it's a part of my life that made me who I am and brought me to where I am today. So I'm gonna just be grateful that I'm here and happy that my son is well. And I'm working on the next two books, which will be coming out next year. One of them will actually go through my childhood and kind of discuss the things we were talking about, which led me to be in an abusive marriage. And then the other book will discuss sort of the relationship I'm in now with my husband, because we have a beautiful marriage. But at the same time, I think there's some interesting and unique aspects of one person in a relationship being from a very nice family, growing up normal, so to speak, and somebody like me who has been through all these things and all this stuff that I bring into a relationship that you don't normally have to deal with. So, it talks a little more about that and the healing journey, and, hoping to just, help people kind of continue on that path to know that if you got out of that, now here's what we're looking at, after your abusive situation. This is what love might look like. These are things you might run into, but you are still going to prevail and you're still going to be okay.
Now, Grasping for Air is available on all the major...
Yes, anywhere books are sold online, and certainly anyone can go to my website and there's a link there, and they can also get the link for Facebook, Instagram, email. I urge anybody that has questions or just wants to say hi to reach out to me, and you can certainly get a hold of me. I do personally respond to every message I get.
Okay, you get the, your website is?
DanaSDiaz.com.
Okay, DanaDiaz.com.
Yes.
Dana, it was a pleasure talking to you, interacting with you. I think you've done amazing. You're an amazing communicator. It was a privilege and a pleasure.
Well, the pleasure was mine, and thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Dana. Let's stay in touch, and I'll send you copies of the book.
I appreciate that. I would love that, and I'll get you a copy of mine.
Excellent. Thanks, Dana. Take care.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye.